Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Triggered Precision Machine. Hope you guys are having a weekend. Today we're going to talk about prone shooting in depth. So for today's video and the next 3 videos after this, we're going to talk about each of the different shooting positions that we talked about in last week's video. So as I mentioned before, today will be prone. The video after this will be seated, then we'll talk about kneeling, and then we'll finish up with standing position. And all we're doing is breaking down each of these positions and figuring out ways to improve our stability and shoot better. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Alright, here we are. We have our nice little Voodoo 22 out for this demonstration, and we're going to start with supported prone. So each of these 4 positions have supported and unsupported versions. And all this supported means is the rifle is supported in some means, and that can be something like this, a bipod. It could be a backpack, it could be a rock or something you rest your rifle on, or a log. Could be a front bag, or anything that allows you to rest the rifle on that object and gain a little bit of stability. So let's take a look at how I build this position. So I always start square to my target. So I have the rifle lined up roughly with the target right there. And if you notice at the front of the rifle, I have the bipod up a couple inches from its lowest position. And I do that purposely because I like to bring the rifle up so the buttstock is more in line with the shoulder pocket on my chest, and as opposed to having it up here on the top of your shoulder in the trap area, which allows you much better recoil absorption, better follow-up shots, better sight tracking, and everything that comes with better recoil absorption. So after we're squared up to the target, you'll notice if you drew a line across my knees right here, it's perfectly perpendicular to the rifle, which is in line with the target. And from here, we just drop down and build our position. So when we're down in the prone, we want our legs spread out as much as possible. So make it comfortable, not uncomfortable, but we want our feet flat to the ground so we have the most contact with the ground in our body. So as we're building this up, get yourself comfortable with your elbows, and generally speaking, we want our elbows to be perpendicular to the rifle as well. So there's issues that come about with follow-up shots if you skew your body or even your elbows and arms like this. So that makes the recoil have an effect on your body and can push you off your target. So we square ourselves up, nice good contact with the ground, and then we drop down into our rifle and start building a nice cheek weld. So make any adjustments you need to. And actually this is a little bit too low for me, so I'm going to pop the bipod up a little bit. Go up 1 notch and see how that feels. Yeah, that's much better. So that brings up a good point. Don't settle for anything but a perfectly comfortable position when you're doing this. There's no compromises that need to be made. You have time on your side unless you're in a war zone or something like that, but you have time to build this position up. Generally speaking, this is one of those positions we use when we have the luxury of spending time to build a very stable platform. So we continue to build it. If you notice, the buttstock is right here where it should be, and that gives me really good recoil absorption. And then put our magazine in, and we'll go eyes and ears. We'll take a couple shots downrange. All right. So you might have noticed that I was taking my time between those shots. And once again, this is a position we can shoot when we have the luxury of time. So focus on our good shooting fundamentals. Really focus on your breathing, your trigger press, and your sight alignment. So all of those things, focusing on all of those things just helps take your mind off of what's going on downrange and allows you to break a perfect shot on that target. So once again, this is about as stable as it gets for a shooting position that's not off of a bench rest or something like that. This is incredibly stable, and the whole purpose of this position is to get the rifle in a spot where it doesn't move and has very little input from you, the shooter. So all we're doing right there is we're getting a semi-firm grip on the pistol grip, and generally speaking that's like a moderately firm handshake grip is what I like to call it. And we're pulling that rifle ever so slightly back into our shoulder and breaking our shot. I don't preload the bipod, and the reason I don't preload the bipod is not all surfaces will allow you to put a load on the bipod. So if you're shooting off the hood of a car or shooting off of a frozen rock or something like that, or even dirty like ground or anything like that, it's going to change how the load interacts with the bipod. So, and that can give you a lot of inconsistency. So my way of circumventing that is just simply not loading the bipod. And for me it works, and I have really consistent groups and shooting across a whole variety of surfaces. So something to think about. I used to load the bipod a lot, and then I discovered that, well, I can't do it on certain things, so why do it at all? So that's supported prone. It's very basic. This is the most stable. So now let's take a look at some of the other variations of supporting the rifle. Alright guys, here we are. Took the bipod off and I threw down my Mystery Ranch 3-day assault pack. Now this is a pack that I hunt with a lot of times. It carries just enough to go out for a day and carry a spotting scope and all the other things that you need for like a day out hunting. So it also makes for a perfect front rest, and I've used it this way several times on animals out in the field. So all the theories are the same, all of the practices are the same, shooting from this position as it would be from a bipod. We have a nice steady front rest for our rifle, and in a lot of cases this is even more steady than a bipod because you have all the surface area of the bag on the ground. And I have a jacket and another bean bag inside of this pack, and that allows the rifle to sit right there, and you can see it's not moving. It's rock solid. So we'll drop behind the rifle, build up our position, take a few shots. So we square up to the rifle, legs are perpendicular, rifle is in line with the target. We'll drop down, build our position up the exact same way using the Armageddon Gear Game Changer as our rear support. So the only downside to this is sometimes the rifle is going to be a little bit lower to the ground. Sometimes that's just how it is. So we can change that by turning the rifle on its side and bringing it up a little bit, and that brought it up quite a bit. And we're still very stable. So from here we'll take a couple shots. Alright, both of those two went into the same hole. Now, that is a very, very stable position. It's a great position to use if you want to shed a little weight. Leave the bipod at the truck if you're hunting, and just use your ruck or your bag as a means of supporting the rifle in the front. So, like I mentioned, this is usually how I'll hunt. I don't hunt with a bipod, typically speaking, if I'm going to be hiking up in the mountains or something like that. This is a great position. This is something you can easily train too with dry fire and out at the range. So get out there and practice this one, guys. Now we'll take a look at some of the unsupported prone positions. Alright guys, so I lied. One more thing with supported prone shooting before we move on to unsupported. If we're out there hunting with a front bipod, or we're shooting a match with a front bipod, a lot of times it's a great idea to use the ruck that you brought instead of a rear support bag. So when we're hunting, this is the last thing I want to throw in my bag. This is literally a leather bag of beans, and it weighs quite a few pounds. So I'm always going to have my ruck with me or my backpack here, and that serves as a great rear support as well as a front support. So if we have our bipod, we can very easily use our backpack as a rear support like we have it here. So you'll notice it's kind of skewed off to one side of the rifle, and I did that so I could get the proper elevation, and I also elevated the bipod to the max length of the legs. So I'll go ahead and build this position up for us. So just like always, square up. And I kind of have the upper part of my chest rested on the ruck, and my support hand is also on the backpack, but it's back here at the rear of the buttstock, and that allows me to change the elevation of the rifle very easily. So this is an incredibly comfortable position. I could fall asleep here if I needed to and stay on the rifle for a long time. And both of those rounds went through the same hole. Very, very stable position. So that about wraps up supported prone for real this time. So let's take a look at unsupported prone now. Alright guys, here we are, unsupported prone. There's nothing laid out here, and the bipod is off of the rifle. So the rifle is going to be 100% supported by my bone structure. So the way we build this up is a little bit different than how we set up a supported prone position. So I'll still start out squared up to the target, but when we build our position from here, you gotta be careful not to bang our rifle up, but you want to find a position along the fore end that allows a good elevation for the rifle. So as we're building this, we want to make sure that we have good contact with the ground. So from our waist on, we have 100% contact with the ground. Our feet are nice and flat, and then we have our two elbows out here, and that gives us two nice points of contact up front. So we adjust our elevation by kind of moving our elbows, settle into the rifle, and you can be very, very steady this way. So this is another important one to focus on our natural point of aim. So when we get to that position and we're on target, take a nice deep breath, settle into the position, close your eyes, open them a couple seconds later, and see where the crosshairs are. And then all we do is shift our lower body over to rotate the rifle into the right position if we're off to the left or to the right. And right there feels pretty good, so we'll take a couple shots. Alright, so that is the unsupported prone position in the most difficult sense. So we're not using any sort of extra tools to steady our position or gain any sort of stability. So now from here, let's talk about different ways that we can improve this position and become more steady. Alright guys, so the worst is behind us, that nasty unsupported prone position where we have nothing but our elbows to rest the rifle on. It's a difficult position, but it is something that we can train and practice and become very proficient at. So now let's start taking a look at some of the devices and things that we can use to improve this unsupported prone position. So first off, let's take a look at our sling here. So this is a short action precision cuff sling. So very well made sling, has a lot of good adjustability in it, has this nice cuff here that you put through your support, you put your support arm through, and you can tighten it up, and it allows a lot of great stability when shooting in these unsupported positions. So if you notice how I have it set up on the rifle, I have the front QD attached to the right side of the rifle, and the rear QD is attached to the left side of the rifle. So I was shown this a few years ago, and I didn't understand it at first until I actually started shooting this position a lot. But what this does is when you get into the sling and tighten it up and get into your position on target, it allows a lot of really good lateral support and stability on the rifle. So if you notice when you're down in this unsupported prone position, a lot of your stability is lateral. so the crosshairs are drifting to the left and to the right of the bowl instead of vertical up and down. So when we get into the rifle sling, and how we do that is making sure that our cuff is nice and open, and then we simply pull it up to the very top of our support arm bicep, and it doesn't need to be super tight, just moderately tight like that. And from there, you can see the sling is now wrapped around the bottom of the forend right here. So I'll take my support arm and I'll loop it in between myself and the rifle sling, and then I'll grab the forend like that. And that's the basis of this position for me. So from there, I'll build up my shooting platform and square up to the target, drop down, and make sure the sling is properly adjusted so it's nice and tight, and you're utilizing the support of the sling to enhance your body structure. So we'll still drop down, utilize all the same fundamentals. So settle into the rifle, take a nice deep breath, and then we close our eyes and see where the crosshairs are resting. So I'm just off to the left of the bull, so I'm going to rotate my body around, and that's much better. And you'll find when you get in this position, you can almost kind of sink into it and settle down into the rifle, and you become more stable that way. So you got to figure out what works best for you. And once again, you'll see my upper body is pretty elevated off the ground, so I have that buttstock right where it needs to go, and we're pretty stable right here. So we'll take a couple shots. Alright guys, so way more stable than shooting completely unsupported without any sort of other device or anything to support your bone structure and improve the position. So I like that a lot. I train that way quite a bit, and I think it's a good thing to have in your arsenal, or at least understand the basics of and the why behind we do that sort of thing. So you can play around with how you set your sling up, how tight it is, where it positions on your bicep, where the front of the sling is attached. You can move it fore and aft. You can switch it over to the left side if you want, see how that works out for you. But there's a lot of different variations of shooting like this, and this is just how I do it. So now a lot of you guys are asking, well, what if your sling doesn't have a cuff like that? So great question. And I have a sling right here that we're going to tie onto the rifle, and we'll take a look at that next. Alright guys, so I have a more traditional type sling here. This one is actually a carbine sling made for an AR-15, but it'll serve the purpose of this demonstration. So this is just a very simple single strap sling. It's got a padded portion to it here, but it doesn't have any sort of cuff, and it's more in line with what a traditional leather hunting sling or something else like that would resemble. So the setup for me is very similar. So I have it right here, just a little bit further back on the forend on the right side, and then the rear of it is in the same place as the short action precision sling. And the way I use this is very, very similar. We just don't have a cuff for our support arm bicep. So I'll bring the rifle up and basically do what I call swimming the sling. So you'll stick your arm through between the sling and the rifle, loop it around, and basically make a wrap around your arm like that. And then you bring it in, and you should have a pretty good amount of tension on it right here as you sit. So from here, we build the position in the same way. Square up to the target, and we drop down. So one thing to note is when you're in this position right here, it's really nice to have a quick adjust on your sling so you can tighten up the tension or release the tension as needed. So I have this sling preset and it's right where I need it to, but if it did need adjustment, I have all that right here and I can make small adjustments and then get back into the position and see how that feels. So this is pretty good right here. It's not as stable as using the short action cuff sling, but it's a lot better than just shooting off your elbows. So let's take a couple shots. Okay, so I was able to hold those in about maybe 3/4 of an inch or an inch. So again, this is one of those positions that you can practice in your living room with dry fire. You can practice it out at the range, but it's a great position to know, and this is a very, very quick and easy way to increase your stability from the unsupported prone position. So now let's take a look at some of the other things that we can use to support this position. Alright, so let's pop this sling off. We'll take a look at a couple other things real quick. So in addition to using a bipod or a backpack, we also talked about using bags as a front support. So I have a couple bags here, and these are just Weebad pump pillows and stuff like that they use for the NRL and the PRS type competition, but these also make great front rests. So for a very, very fast and light front support, this thing is awesome. It weighs almost nothing. It's full of like polyfiber or something like that, polyfill, but it's very, very light. It weighs less than a pound, and it gives a really good amount of stability and allows the front fore end of the rifle to kind of dig into it and just become very, very stable. So we'll build this position up, and then we'll take a look at this without using any sort of rear support. We'll just use our fist to adjust our up and down and gain the stability in the rear of the rifle. Build our position up here. So right there is good, and you'll notice I have one finger sticking out. So I have the butt of the rifle kind of rested on my bottom 3 fingers here, and that's the perfect elevation for the target that I have downrange. So a lot of times we can't get the rifle as high as we want it, and that's just one of those things that the circumstances are going to dictate, and a lot of times we just can't get it how we want it. So we have to be able to adapt and shoot from those positions. So it's good to kind of train all sorts of elevations as we progress through shooting these different positions. So this is a really good front rest. We also have a larger pump pillow here that's a great front rest. This one might actually let the rifle get a little lower, and for me that's going to be a more difficult position. So it's very stable, but it's hard to get a good cheek weld behind, a good sight picture, and good placement of the buttstock in your shoulder. So there's certain things we might be able to do to try to elevate it a little bit more, like fold it over itself like that. We gained a couple inches there, but we're just not going to be as high as we really want to. So again, a good position to train because you might be faced with this circumstance at some point. So all of these positions are relatively stable compared to some of the other ones we're going to get into later this week, especially the standing and kneeling. But if you can drop down to the prone, then generally speaking, we have time on our side. So don't settle for an unstable, uncomfortable position. That is the key to all of this. So make sure that you're comfortable, because if you're not, that's going to be in your head, and that's going to affect your shot down range. So take your time, build the position upright, focus on your fundamentals, breathing, sight alignment, trigger press, and break a good shot. So if we were shooting a large centerfire rifle here, I'd love to show you guys how easy it is to absorb the recoil, stay on target, and make quick follow-up shots from this position. But we're shooting a 22 today, so it is what it is, but the principle is still there. So if you get out and you train like this, you'll see exactly what I mean. And it is a huge, huge difference when you get that rifle up and you can position it higher up in your chest, right there where you need it to be, absorb the recoil, and send additional rounds downrange while still maintaining your sight alignment on the target. So it's been very beneficial to me training like this, and I hope you guys get out there and test it out and see how it works for yourselves. But in the comment section, if you have any other variations of this supported or unsupported prone position, let me know. Let's talk about them. I'd love to hear some of the other ones. These are the basic ones that I know and that I use, and they've worked for me pretty well. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. Thanks for the support. And one more thing before we go, we actually got in official Triggered Precision Machine t-shirts and Triggered Precision Machine stickers that are going to be up on the website later tonight. So they're going to be priced very, very good. So I hope you guys buy some. And one other thing, we have a bunch more proof barrels in stock. We have all of our Trigger Tech triggers. And for the next 72 hours, any purchase of a Trigger Tech trigger or a proof barrel, you guys get a free t-shirt. So check it out. And thanks again for the support, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.